is he wanted to make tonight a gift to our leader, Nahid Nation. So I'm inviting Speaker Rice.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Okay, one more picture.
Sorry. Wow, that is so nice. Absolutely.
Yes, wow. Thank you.
Well, wow, that's an outstanding portrait. I think I know who I'm going to be asking for one day. You know, I'm sure my kids would love to get me a gift of a portrait of mine, I'm sure. And thank you to Nahid for those inspirational words. I think that's got us all fired up and recommitted to the very important work that we need to be doing. I just want to say one of my favorite things about this evening is not only are there so many esteemed members of the Black community who have been here doing that work and doing the fight for so long in Alberta and in Edmonton, but I really love seeing the little ones here as well.
Yeah.
It's seeing the kids and the next generation of those kids who they always probably don't have to fight as hard as the older generations, but that fight might be different. But just to see them feeling part of community and collected is very important. So now we're going to move on to a panel discussion. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get my notes because I don't want to mess up on the biography of some of our esteemed guests who are speaking tonight. So we're going to have a wonderful panel discussion tonight about business, advocacy, and resilience. So you folks are intrigued because our panelists are truly exceptional for this conversation, and we are very, very honored to have them here today. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'm going to begin by asking Dr. Andre McDonald to come join us. I saw him. Where is he? There he is. There he is, Dr. McDonald. Thank you so much. So Dr. McDonald is currently a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and the Associate Vice President in Strategic Research Initiatives and Performance at the University of Alberta. And he has nearly 20 years of experience in fabrication, development, and performance assessment of thermal and cold spray coatings. Dr. McDonald also currently leads the Experiential Learning and Innovation, Technology and Entrepreneurship, the ELITE program for Black youth. So thank you for being here today, Dr. McDonald.
Our next panelist is Noreen Sibanda. Yeah. Noreen is clinical supervisor, registered provisional psychologist, and the owner of Caucus Psychological. I have known Noreen for over a decade as she has always contributed in terms of building communities in our province. She currently serves as the Executive Director of Alberta Black Therapists Network, and is an essential instructor at multiple educational institutions in Edmonton. Noreen, I'm so grateful you continue what you have been doing for many, many years, and thank you for joining us tonight.
And our next panelist, it's a soft spot in my heart for her, is Donna Coombs-Montrose. I think you know Donna, right? Donna is a community activist and history advocate who has resided in Edmonton for over 20 years. Her family came from the Caribbean, where she served. I knew she was going to yell out when I said that. Where she served as a librarian and archivist. She currently serves very proudly as the historian laureate for the city of Edmonton. And I can also attest to her incredible musical skills, as I have heard her perform with the Caribbean Women's Network at community events in my riding. So she's got some room and screaming. So please welcome Donna. And finally, our moderator for this evening, for our panel, is our very own, and somebody who's not a stranger to any of you, the MLA for Edmonton City Centre, Mr. David Shepherd.
Thanks very much. Well, thank you to all of you for being here tonight. Let's get some good questions. So, here in Alberta, We have a rich history of members of our Black communities being engaged in advocacy and activism to fight for their rights. Whether it's things like equity in access to housing and in public in spaces, the treated employment, a whole lot more. We've made some progress since then, but we know discrimination still exists. We're seeing that, south of the border. We're seeing that up here. We're seeing people who are actively trying to push some of that progress that we've made back. So are there some lessons we can learn from our history, from the folks that have gone before us who've done that work here? Is there lessons we can learn, some inspiration we can take from some of those leaders in those movements? Why don't we start with you, Donna, as our resident historian? Oh, sorry, you gotta turn it on.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Alberta has a long history of being a province where Black people have come. We've been coming here since the turn of the last century was the first big wave of a large group of people. Prior to that, people came in dribs and drabs, individuals. But the resilience we have shown from the start is when they kept us at the border for 2 years, before they allowed us to enter Alberta or to come any further west. We didn't turn back. We didn't go back to Oklahoma and Texas, where we have been running from Jim Crow laws and racism and the Ku Klux Klan, because that's in our DNA. That is the history we're coming with, that we don't want what's going on in the United States. We're looking for Canada, where the reputation at the time was this was a place of peace, and it was an open border, and it was a place where people can settle and be accepted. Of course, the reality was different when we arrived. They sent us off to Amber Valley, to Wildwood, and to Camp C, and to Breton, because they didn't want Black people in the city of Edmonton. We said, hey, we're going to find wherever we are. You send us up there, we're going to make a living there for now, but that's not the last you're going to see of us. So our history has been one of defense, of resilience, of showing that we are not taking SHIT. I'm sorry for people. But we dug in and we fought until the next battle. So we have been fighting in waves to hold our own, to defend ourselves against the onslaught of, because we recognize racism when we see it. When somebody keeps asking you, where are you from? What is your intention in asking me that question? Are you trying to say I should go back to wherever it is you think I'm from? I'm from Camp C. What next? I'm from Wildwood. My roots are here. I'm third generation like Debbie Beaver. I'm not going back. I was born here. The only person who's entitled to ask me any question like that is an indigenous person. And they welcome us, because they recognize we are brothers and sisters. For example, people coming from Oklahoma and Texas were mixed with Choctaw and Cherokee and tribes from the southern United States when they arrived in Canada. They were already mixed with indigenous blood. But they came north anyway looking for a better life and found that the racism in Canada, which we're still fighting today, was present here. The Ku Klux Klan had the biggest convention in Canada in Edmonton in 1932. Many of us don't recognize that racism was rampant here. There was a mayor of Edmonton who was in the Ku Klux Klan, Dan Knott. So we understand who we are. We understand who they are. So when we see them coming with whatever agenda, we recognize it and we dig in and say we ain't going nowhere. We fight you on any front. We call you out. We recognize what it is you're offering us. Because we recognize what racism is. We continue training ourselves. Maybe I'm taking too long, David.
Go ahead.
But that is how we are. That is who we are. we've had waves of struggle where we've had to push back. We created Black Power movements in the 1970s because racism was so entrenched in Canada. When students came from the Caribbean in the 60s for higher education here, we couldn't find housing, we weren't allowed to eat in certain places. The doors were shut in our faces very often across Canada, because I was in Toronto as a student at the time. We're talking about the same thing happening in Edmonton and other places. We know in our profession, that we did not, even as qualified master's degree holders, as archivists or librarians, we couldn't get jobs in our fields. And that was the kind of atmosphere we found that forced us, pushed our backs against the wall, and we said, we're not taking any more. And so we revolted by coming out on the streets to fight in defense of our brothers and sisters, our students and family members facing racism on the workplace. Take the porters, the sleeping car porters that we heard about. Confined to the worst jobs in the industry. All they could do is clean other people's, clean out spittoons, make beds, and that kind of thing. When the sleeping car porter industry, when the transportation industry required black men to work the trains across Canada. Until they formed their union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union, that's when they got respect. That's when they stopped calling him Sam and George. They had no name, they were no money. They were a ghost. And so we have to continue the battles. We have to fight in defense of any gains we make. We just had Black Lives Matter. We go to sleep again, we say, well, we made some gains now. We push them back. No more carding and no more stopping us and asking us stupid questions like, where are you going? Every day a police officer stopping you to ask you, where are you going? I'm going to work, I'm going to university. I'm going to the same place you asked me yesterday where I was going. We put a stop to that because we had a struggle that pushed back on that. We exposed it. And that is what we have to continue doing. Fighting for the gains that we make and defending them, because the minute we go to sleep, here they come, eroding the gains we have made. So that's just a lesson. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Mom.
Check.
There we go. Good history there and some deep passion. I appreciate it. Now, one of the things you touched on there, Don, you talked about folks being limited in their opportunities for employment. And we know that's been historic, it's been a challenge for our communities. And one of the ways that folks from black communities, African Caribbean black communities, have gotten around that is they've chosen to go into business for themselves. So they've pursued the path of entrepreneurship to get around some of those challenges of systemic racism. And that remains a very popular choice for, no problem. Check. That remains a very popular choice. We know that black entrepreneurship in our province continues to grow. Many newcomers to Alberta from Africa and other parts of the world choose to go into business. But we also know from research that black entrepreneurs face more challenges and more barriers. The Black Senate Group did a great report on this, found they have a harder time accessing capital, getting training and mentorship, finding programs that meet their needs. So, Andre, maybe I'll talk to you about this one. You have a background in this entrepreneurship, you have these programs for you. What are some of the supports that we could be looking at and putting in place in terms of government and in the community to help support black entrepreneurship?
So thank you so much, everyone. It's really great to be here with you tonight and to answer that really great question. So what I'll probably do is maybe just start off, and just ask the question, why do we actually want to do entrepreneurship in the first place, and is there another approach that we can actually take to that, right? So the program that I'm currently engaged in is one nice example of that, where rather than looking at, speaking about entrepreneurship through the traditional things that you might actually see Black people doing, which is sometimes usually food and beauty, which are not the high economic value type of businesses, to really start to reconceptualize entrepreneurship through the lens of higher wage, higher economic activity, higher social upward mobility opportunities. So with the experiential learning and innovation and technology and entrepreneurship program for Black youth, for example, we really look at taking a step back. Before youth even start to think about entrepreneurship, we start to introduce them to that. Imagine a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old speaking in terms of an entrepreneurial mindset, where they're thinking about what they can actually use their skills to do, be it in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM, for example, to create opportunities that will actually not only grow themselves, but grow their communities as well, create jobs in their community, starting to get them to think about that early, and then giving them the tools to ask questions and really engage around that. That is a really good way of starting that conversation and really starting to build that capacity 10, 15 years before those entrepreneurs actually start to engage. So what I'm hoping to see and what we've actually started to do as a community, actually with the parents, with the broader community groups, I can call it a few of them here, with the government and others, is really to look at providing opportunities for you to get practical, hands-on, work-integrated training, creating businesses, but not just from the perspective of business only, but from the perspective of something that they can sell the product. And the product could be a new app, a new technology, a new bionic arm, something that will actually generate a significant amount of revenue that they will then feed right back into that community, use it as a platform for training others, upskilling others, and then supporting them to create their own businesses. So what I'm really articulating here is not just entrepreneurship from the perspective of creating a storefront, but creating a mindset, right? Where folks are actually the leaders, and they're actually the leaders, and they're the ones that are actually creating new opportunities, for others. So that is essentially, what I'm, would be articulating, right? One final point that I will make, on this is how do we actually get it done, right? And the only way, from my personal experience and my, own observations and what I've heard from others, is it has to be done as a community, academic, government partnership. And just as an example of that, really quickly, when I look at what we've done with just I just use the NDP program as just an example of, just to exemplify this. But when we really think about the amount of engagement and turnout that we've had from organizations like the Black Business Ventures Association, we look at Edmonton Unlimited, we look at NBCC, who have really supported a university's group of professors to create a program to give Black youth paid entrepreneurship and STEM work integrated training opportunities, and then engaging further, with government and not-for-profit foundations. We could never have done this by, ourselves. Black Canadian Women in Action is another one that really drives. And I really, articulate that because there's no way we could have done training Black women for entrepreneurship without working with community groups like GNT, for example. So, that is something that I would say is a big takeaway. It has to be done with community. It has to be in partnership. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. The highlight what you said there too, government needs to be there at the table, providing that support for the post-secondary, for the community organizations, helping build that capacity in the community. Speaking of areas where government needs to step up. Well, one of the other areas where we know that we can have challenges for our community, folks, and in part due to systemic racism, is accessing healthcare. Whether that's physical healthcare, whether that's for mental health care. We know there's real challenges that exist. There can be problems that come from culture, from language, from misunderstanding, from systemic barriers that exist, gaps in medical training or education. So, and right now we know we are seeing incredible strains on our healthcare system, which can make all of that so much worse. So Noreen, maybe to you, in your work with the Black Therapists Network and your own business, what do you think are some of the steps we could be taking that could make a real difference for Black Albertans and their ability to access care?
Hello? Evening, everyone. Thank you, David, for that question. I think I'll start off by recognizing that we all have healthcare, but that healthcare is not actually meeting our needs. There's a gap. Part of that gap is knowing when to access, how to access, who we access in the first place. This goes to both physical and mental health. And I think our biggest challenge that we come to is when we reach out for the supports that we need, they're not as straightforward as we want them to be. Donna highlighted that there's spaces where doors were being shut in our faces. This continues to exist. I love to share this because I think it's relevant. 2 years back, I had a baby. And lucky for me, I was aware of the statistics and what I was walking into within that space. Black women are 500 times likely to die in childbirth. This is not a stat in Africa. This is the stat here. Because our pain is ignored. It also means whenever we do share what's going on, we are told certain things. I told my OBGYN, sorry to the men in the room, I'm experiencing tenderness in my breast. And she told me, it hasn't turned pink yet. If you know anything as a woman, my nipples are not turning pink anytime soon. And that's highlighting two things. Where she was trained, she didn't have black bodies. So she doesn't know what to expect. But also does not even expect me to ask that question because I'm supposed to suffer through the pain. Whatever we're being given, which is not enough, we're supposed to take it as if it is. And this also goes to how we engage with our mental health. Most of the time we're told, go to Access 24. Does anyone know what Access 24 is? Yes. A few people in the room, but that's not everyone. That tells you that the community doesn't know where to actually get those supports, right? And when we talk about who's in Access 24, not the folks that look like us. We also know that the system that trains us to work is very much rooted in Western ways of healing and not actually talking about the Afrocentric ways of understanding us. I'm a therapist. I do say everyone needs to go to therapy. If you have a head over your head, go to therapy. If you have a mother, go to therapy. But what does that therapy actually look like? Right? We're coming from a space where therapy was going to my grandma's feet and sitting down, asking her questions, being healed from her telling the stories. Right now, therapy is going and talking to a stranger. A white stranger. And that's not to say they're not equipped to do the work, but it's very limited when I have 15 minutes to share my story. And I still have to explain why I had to put my oxtail on the stove for 6 hours. And why that was an issue with my mom when I didn't do it on time. Because that history does not exist. And with the limited resources, it's $235 a session. Now I'm paying to educate you. Now I'm paying for me to explain my own dynamics to myself.
rather than having the supports that we needed. And to echo what you were talking about, without the community, we can't heal. Because that means you're telling me that the problem is me. And we know the problem has never been us. The problem has always been the systems in place that keep putting us in certain positions. And if we're not getting jobs, we're not able to thrive in business, our mental health is not going to be okay. So really the gap is not having mental health or physical health that is set up to meet us where we're at, without an understanding of our bodies, our cultures, and our lived experiences.